The products you use go through many stages before reaching you. Take cheese for example. The first step would be milk production. Next is the cheese making process. And then the cheese would be sold at a retail store where you would buy it. This chain is called the chain of production, and it is different stages can be classified into different industrial sectors. Taking a cheese example again, the first stage is to the milk production. It is based on agriculture and so is in the primary sector. The next stage is the making of cheese, manufacturing, so secondary sector. And finally the selling of the cheese. This is called retailing and is part of the tertiary sector. So the primary sector usually involves extracting raw materials. Here are a few examples of primary sector activities. Mining and quarry. Coal, copper, salt, iron ore and other raw materials are dug out of the ground. Fishing. Fishing is the netting, trapping or trawling of fish, crab, lobsters and other seafood. Forestry. Forestry mainly involves managing and protecting forests, including production of wood. But perhaps the most important primary sector activity would be agriculture. This involves a range of farming activities involving food production and creating decorative and exotic products. The secondary sector is mainly converting raw materials and components into finished or semi-finished goods. This sector includes manufacturing, processing, assembly, and construction. Some examples would be metalworking and car production. Semi-finished or intermediate goods are sold to other businesses as input for the production of a final good. For example, parts used in cars such as steering wheels and car seats are semi-finished goods. The next group is tertiary sector. This involves the provision of services. It's the provision and delivery of services. The range of services provided is humongous and is usually divided into two. First is direct services. Also known as personal services, it's aimed directly at customers. Some examples are financial services, telecommunication, personal services, education, and transport. Next is commercial services. These are provided to support businesses with the distribution of products. This can be separated into two. Trade, which consists of export agencies and import agencies, and aids to trade, which are communication systems, transport, or advertising. Businesses in different sectors are mostly interdependent. This means each sector relies on each other. Again, our cheese example. The primary sector relies on the tertiary sector to transport the milk to the cheese factory. The cheese factory relies on the primary sector for raw materials, which is the milk, and tertiary sector for transport and advertising. The workers in the tertiary sector rely on the primary sector for food. There would also be dependence within each sector. For example, telecommunication services might rely on advertising agencies to promote their businesses. Both of these services are in the tertiary sector. In different countries, the size of each industrial sector is likely to be different. In more developed countries, the size of the primary sector is very small, and the size of the tertiary sector is more dominant. In poorly developed countries, the primary sector is likely to be at a larger size than the other two sectors. Well, that's all for today. If you preferred it instead of a whack in the face with your textbook, then like and consider subscribing.